Hi, guys, and welcome to our first ever episode. Today, we're joined by Edward, who will be sharing with us his experience in SMU and wealth management.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity for having me on this podcast. I'm a graduate from Singapore Management University, SMU. I graduated last year in April. So I did a degree in accountancy and a second major in finance. And currently, I'm working at UBS, which actually I was part of Credit Suisse, got acquired by UBS. So I'm part of UBS's graduate program. So for many of you viewers, UBS is a bank. It's a Swiss bank, and it's a good company to work at. It's a pretty good environment. Yeah. Anything else you would like me to share about my experiences or highlight, Joel?
Maybe let's talk first about your educational background, because I'm sure a lot of students probably want to know what kind of uni, like why you chose SMU.
Right, right. So apologies for that. Let me take a step back. So I graduated from ACS Independent back in I think 2016 or 2017. And at that point in time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So SMU was just one of the three local universities that we have here. To me, all these three universities were pretty much the same if I was going to do something that was related to business or accountancy. And there's also the idea of going overseas. So at that point, I did apply for a few different universities, but I was very fortunate to have a scholarship from SMU. So I think that was what cemented my kind of choosing the university. So ending up in SMU, I decided to do a degree in accountancy, mainly because my dad's an accountant, right? So I think many of you guys, you follow your parents' footsteps or your relatives' footsteps, especially when we just graduate from JC or poly, you don't really know what exactly you want to do. So I was interested in business. I thought accountancy was a good pairing with business because of how technical it was while still complementing some of the things you learn in business. So that's how I ended up with a double degree in SMU. And I think it was a pretty good experience.
Okay, so I've heard, that in my time learning more about unis last year and this year, I
Yeah.
heard that SMU students generally have far more networking opportunities than, for a student from compared to a student from like NUS or NTU. So is this true? Do you think it's true?
Wow. Um, well, I think it's hard to really compare between the schools because I can't really say for certain whether SMU has more networking opportunities than NUS or NTU. I do think that when I first started school, maybe 5 years ago, there was that preconceived notion that SMU was definitely a bit more work centric. You have a lot more internships, a lot more networking opportunities with the main goal to get you a foot into the industry maybe a year or two before actually joining the job work market, right? So that's what SMU was trying to pitch themselves as. But I think today, if you ask me, I see NUS and NTU taking a lot of steps forward. I'm pretty sure they have a lot more networking exposure as well, and a lot more chances to go for internships, more events for their students to try to understand more about different industries. For SMU specifically, I can comment that there were in fact a lot of chances for me to experience different industries through my internships, through a lot of, they call this SMUX, is kind of a class, but the final exam is doing a project for an actual company that's outside, right? It's not a SMU related organization. So you're working together with your group mates to actually try to solve a real company's problems, right? And I think these kind of exposure helps you to learn a lot more about businesses, a lot more about how the world actually functions. And these are kind of also good networking opportunities to work with different companies outside. Apart from that, there's also a lot of alumni networks, a lot of events where people come back. I do often come back to kind of advise some juniors and to mentor, as well as to kind of advise people on some of the industry directions or what they might be interested in, right? So yeah, at least for SMU front, there's networking opportunities. For other schools, I'm sure they have as well, but I'm not sure if SMU is more than NTU and NUS today.
I see, I see. So, was it, you said that you've had a lot of experience with internships and
Yeah.
networking. Was there anything in particular that made you want to join wealth management, or was it just something you wanted to do from the start?
Yeah, so I would have never considered joining wealth management when I first came into university, to say the truth, right? Because I came in with the idea of doing accountancy, but I kind of saw the harsh reality of what an accountant's lifestyle, work life is like doing one of the internships while at SMU. So that's how I started to try and find other experiences. So I think internships is an amazing way for you to experience different industries, even if it doesn't convince you that you would like to work there. It can cancel out some of the options where you don't want to work in a certain industry. So for myself, I had internships in corporate finance firms. So it's a bit similar to like investment banking. To put it simply, it's finance, but you do a little bit more on the intense side, do deals where you work a little bit later than other people. For smaller firms and for larger firms, as long as you're in this investment banking, corporate finance field, you might end up working past 12 midnight, past 2 a.m. on a daily basis. So that's the lifestyle that I did not envision myself having. So I kind of crossed it out after doing an internship. I did some in strategy firms. I've had some in kind of like a payments firm in Grab, right? I was at Grab Pay for a period of time, trying out different experiences. So all these kind of led me to realize that I am interested in finance. So that's one. I'm sure there's many people out there who are interested in finance. But two, I wanted a finance job with decent work-life balance. So that's kind of how I ended up finding wealth management. I think for most of the private banking wealth management firms, you don't end work past 7, 8 p.m. on a regular basis. While you still have that contact point with finance, you get to follow the markets and you get to help people invest. Yeah.
Actually,
Thank you.
just now you mentioned about your final project in SNU, right? Could you just share with us more about what exactly you personally did?
Right. Okay. So actually, the one that I shared about they call it SMU X. It's kind of not really a final project. So you can do this from the start of year 1 to year 4. It's just classes where they concurrently teach you some of the skill sets that you learn in the normal class, maybe marketing or even for statistics. And then they will try to engage an external partner where you try to apply some of the knowledge that you have in class on either their products, their strategy, or something this external partner requires help with. For the final term project, for SMU is slightly different from NUS and NTU, so we don't really have a thesis. I don't really know if business and accountancy students are required to have a thesis in other universities. But in SMU, for accountancy, we don't have that. So I unfortunately did not have to go through that whole writing a 4 or 5 thousand word essay, similar to like for Joel, you have to remember like extended essay, right? So I think it's something similar. You explore an idea on your own, or actually with a group, and that would be like a kind of a final project if you have one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, I was wondering, right? Because
Yeah.
among the big three unis in Singapore, SMU is like usually ranked like lower compared to NUS NTU, right? Especially in like those, let's say like QS rankings. Do you think you like missed out going to SMU? Or
Yeah. Yep. Sorry, Sean. Go ahead. Is there
no.
something else?
No,
Okay.
no.
Whether I missed out, I mean, I do think I've missed out some of the opportunities from NUS NTU, but I don't think it's on the education front. I'll say that one thing I would have liked to have is maybe the hall life. So there's something that SMU does not offer. I know for some people that it's not a game changer to them, right? Especially if you stay in the East. I think SMU is like the closest. If you don't want to stay in hall, it's a pretty good school. But if you want to experience staying in, like a Temasek Hall, or like even in NTU, like just being part of the community in a small island on its own. Yeah, I think it's pretty fun to just be with your friends. But in terms of the education wise, I think the ranking is something that's very misleading. So from what I understand, the reason why SMU is not in the rankings is because of how small the school is. It doesn't offer a lot of subjects, and it doesn't offer enough thesis papers such that the school can be ranked on like a global scale. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's kind of lower in the rankings. But in terms of the education wise, at least from when I talk to friends in NUS and NTU, I think it's pretty much similar. I don't really think that you can be too technical, or I mean, you're that much more technical if you're from NUS or NTU. And oftentimes, the knowledge that you gain for becoming someone who's maybe a specialist or someone who's more well regarded in that field, it's often through your internship experiences and also what you do outside of just your classes. In fact, I think a lot of knowledge that you gain is really through your own self-learning, which I think you can do being in either of these three universities or even not going to university itself. Yeah.
Speaking more about like the education side, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that SMU focuses on a more like personalized learning, where like the classes are smaller compared to, I guess, like lecture-based learning in NUS and NTU. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that and how it helped you.
Right. I think that's a very big point that you brought up, Joel. So that's one of the main reasons I joined SMU 5 years ago. The thing is, today I'm not sure if this blanket statement still holds well, but back then in 2020, 2019, when I was considering the schools to join, I did have a choice between the three schools, offers between the three, but I wanted to find something that was most similar to my kind of the way ACSI taught the classes. Because we didn't really have lectures. We had a lot of small classes, and every time we had a lecture, especially for like literature or English, I ended up sleeping during those lectures. So I think that's the reason why I didn't want to go for a school where they had that lecture system and then you go for your smaller classes on alternate weeks. I just wanted a seminar-based style where every week you're just in that same smaller class of 30 to 40 students. You see the same people, you talk to the same professor, but there's a lot more intimate kind of relationships being built. The teachers are a lot more forthcoming. In fact, I still do keep in very close contact with many of my SMU professors. So we call them professors after we go to university, right? School is always chair or like madam. So yeah, so now we call them profs. And yeah, I'm still in very close contact with many of them. After class, sometimes you'll go get coffee, you ask them questions, but during class, it's a lot more self-guided learning as well. I think you're going to be asking questions when you don't understand. It's not just going to be sitting down just hearing a teacher speak for 2-3 hours. Yeah, so I think that's a major reason why I joined the SMU.
Okay, Edward, if you were, transported back to before you began uni, is there anything you would have done differently?
Transported back. I think I don't regret going to SMU, but I would have strongly considered trying to apply overseas as well. So back when I was in ACS, I think there's probably some statistic out there where most people end up going overseas, and it's pretty high, I would say, in ACSI. Rightly so, because IB is a very good platform for you to kind of study in the UK or US, and there's very good exposure for many of these people who are working overseas. So when I see my peers who are overseas right now, I think they have matured a lot more. They have gone through a lot more experiences than if you were to stay in Singapore, because you're a lot less sheltered overseas. But there's also that downside. So most of my friends who are overseas end up working there, not wanting to shift back to Singapore. So I think that's something that you should strongly consider, when you float that idea with your parents, and sometimes I guess with your friends as well, right? If you want to study overseas together. I don't regret choosing SMU out of the 3 local universities. I think I had very good experience there. I enjoyed a lot of my CCAs, and if not for overseas education, I would definitely still choose to go SMU 100% of the time, right? Yeah, and the reason why I'm talking so strongly about overseas exposure is because back in year 3, year 4 of SMU, I went for an exchange that was when I realized actually overseas education is quite different from what we do in Singapore. It's a lot more conversational in class. You're not just focused on exams, and there's a lot of priority given to actually learning what you want to learn, and just taking full responsibility of yourself overseas. And I think that's something that's very fun, very exciting. It would be great if you had the means to go overseas to study.
Hmm.
Yeah, can I ask? You said you went on exchange, right? Yeah. Where exactly did you go? I'm
Oh
curious.
yeah. All right. Thanks for the question, Sean. So I went to this university called University of St. Gallen. So this is in Switzerland. Yeah, it's near the east border of Switzerland and Germany. So they speak Swiss German there. And we had a huge group of us from SMU, maybe 35 or 40 students that went to St. Gallen during that 6 months. It's a very good experience. Get to sit into classes where people just debate, it feels like those lectures, like those Aristotle lectures, people just throwing ideas everywhere. Quite interesting. Um, but the great part of exchange is the traveling. I visited over 20 cities when I was there across 5 months. And, as a student, you travel on a smaller budget. You'll probably do overnight buses, you'll stay hostels. Some of these experiences are things that I wouldn't do if I were to go for a holiday right now. But I think as a student, that's something that it's very interesting, very fascinating to go through. And just an overall incredible experience. I'll highly recommend people to try for an exchange if they are in a local university. There are a lot of subsidies out there, there are a lot of grants that you can apply to. Many schools are also offering this, like overseas schools are offering like grants and subsidies when you go for these exchanges. Yeah.
Going to like a non-English, like main language sort of country, was there like any sort of like language barrier, or did they still speak English in the unis?
I think for my university, the main language was still English on top of Swiss German, which was the second language. So I didn't face much difficulties, but I do get your point, Sean. I think there were a couple of my friends, especially if they went to those universities in Sweden or France, where, for example, French is still predominantly uh, a language that most of the locals would want to converse in. And I think it might be a bit harder to fit into the community there. But, exchange is such a short period of time. I'm sure all these students will find a way to somehow form that connection with the locals. And another way to go through with going to an overseas university with a different language is Duolingo, right? So maybe you can try out Duolingo a couple of months before going overseas to just pick up small tidbits of casual language. And I think once you show that you're interested in learning the language, they're a lot more open and receptive to being your friend, to teaching you more about their culture. I think that's a great experience.
Thank you.
You also mentioned about how the exchange program allowed you to gain more freedom in what you wanted to learn, right?
Yeah.
So I guess a question I wanted to ask is the structure of, like, how is the structure of education in SMU? Like, for example, in NUS, you get to choose some optional modules outside of your course that you can take, right? Is it the same in SMU?
Right. So I think for SMU, you have to take from anywhere between 60 to 80% of your modules are these things called core modules. So the reason why there's a percentage range is because different degrees, for example, business, you have a lot less core modules that you have to take and a lot more optional modules which you can explore. Whereas something like accountancy, which was my main degree, ended up having about 80 to 90% of my modules being core modules, and you have very little exposure to what you can take. They can qualify as an optional module that can be mapped as in can kind of apply to your accountancy degree. So let's say you need to take 10 modules, 8 are core. The last 2 have to be somewhat related to accountancy, right? So that's the difference between like accountancy and maybe some other degree like business or sociology in in um, in SMU. Whereas in NUS and NTU, from what I understand, you have probably a lot more leeway in terms of the optional modules. And from what I understand in NTU, some of the optional modules include sports modules, which are pretty fun, right? I heard you can play like basketball or like tennis, and then that can be a way of clearing a module. And I think that's very interesting. And I also had a short like local exchange at NUS during COVID. So I was able to take mods like Chinese music and some other universe of life module to map as an optional module, which SMU sadly does not offer. Yeah, so maybe a TLDR is that SMU has a lot more of a structured curriculum because their focus is trying to get you to graduate on time, but still wanting you to do as many internships as possible. So because of that, it's kind of a little bit more structured in the learning. And then they want you to have used that extra time to go and hunt down internships.
Okay. Just really quickly before we move on to asking about finance, what exactly is a core module? Because from what I understand, is it a module that every student at SMU has to take, or is it
right? So, sorry, yeah.
No, nothing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I just generalized core modules, but you're right in that there are some that every SMU student has to take. There are a few baskets. I don't exactly know what these baskets are anymore because I haven't been there for some time and they change every few years. But there are maybe a couple of modules that every student at SMU has to take. And then your degree also has their own form of kind of like core module where everyone has to clear. And for accountancy, it's very foundational, right? Because it's kind of like a math thing. You got level 1, level 2, level 3, builds on each other. And these are things that all accountancy students have to take as well. Yeah, but just disclaimer, I haven't been in SMU for some time, so I don't know exactly how the baskets are like, how the modules are like. Things might have changed. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so I think now we can move on to asking about questions about your workforce, about the finance industry.
Right.
So I think a lot of people have a general idea of finance as in it's a lot of money, but I understand that you specialize in wealth management. So do you mind sharing with us what is wealth management?
Right. So I've only been in this area for slightly less than a year, so I can't really comment on the whole trajectory or the whole broad scope of wealth management. But if to put it into simpler terms, you can think of us as insurance agents that cannot sell insurance but can sell all the other financial products, right? So we help our clients manage their wealth. That's why wealth management. We look at their shares, their stocks, their funds, their bonds, what they have in their what we call portfolio. So it's that group of amount of money that they have, and we kind of advise them where they should put this money, right? So this function, wealth management, is split between different roles. You have people who go out to meet the clients, build the relationship with them, and they continue to and hopefully keep them as clients to the bank for a long period of time. You have people in this function also coming up with new ways to structure products that might entice some clients to buy them, whether is it products in the private space, bundling different stocks and options together to create something new. And we also have this last kind of function where they really sit down, look at what are the things that the client has, and then tries to position them based on how the market is doing. So, for example, this year, yeah, the AI boom, how we can best make use of that opportunity to create more wealth for the client, while also putting in certain products so that in the event that a recession happens, the client doesn't lose all their money, right? So that's essentially what a wealth manager does. So once again, TLDR, we are like insurance agents, but we can sell everything except insurance.
Actually,
That's a great
on
explanation.
LinkedIn, oh, yeah,
No, go
actually
ahead.
on your
I
LinkedIn,
nothing.
it states you're a wealth management analyst. So can
Yeah.
you elaborate more on the analyst part?
Right. So I think for analysts, it's just a very generic term, right? So many people, when they join a firm, especially in finance, you start out your first few years in your career as an analyst. So it could mean anything. And for myself, I'm supporting relationship managers. I'm an assistant relationship manager, right? So kind of very broad term that just says you are new to an organization. To some people, it's like you're the fresh meat, right? You're the people that's going to do a lot of work. But yeah, we are kind of like the graduates that just joined a firm. For many of us, there's rotational programs. So you'll be different functions within wealth management or in other finance roles. You'll be the ones doing the slides. You'll be the ones doing the Excel. So that's usually what an analyst does in the first 1 to 3 years.
Okay.
Okay, very interesting. You mentioned that you were assistant relationship manager.
Yeah.
Sounds very entrepreneurial. Like it's a big part of your job, retaining clients or reaching out to people. How does that work? What is your secret?
Right. So to put it bluntly, right, the assistant relationship manager role sounds very big, but we are pretty much the small fry of the organization. What we do is we support the relationship managers with most of the administrative tasks. If they have to update certain documents or if they have to pitch ideas to the client, sometimes we're preparing some of the documentations that are required. We don't really take an active part of sourcing or maintaining these relationships at this point in time. We are more of the ones supporting these relationship managers so that they can spend most of their time with the clients. We're doing all the back end stuff. So it could be as simple as executing trades, like clients calling in, and then we're like placing buy orders, placing certain products, answering their queries. But the idea for most people who are in this role, ARM for short, assistant relationship manager, is you eventually want to be a relationship manager. You want to eventually try to source and bring in clients, maintain relationships, and eventually pitch ideas to these clients, because how your paycheck works is you're going to be taking a cut based on how much the clients earn, as well as how much the clients put in with the bank, right? So you're going to earn more if you're able to convince a client to put more money in your bank versus maybe a competitor's bank, right? So I think that's how a relationship manager earns money here.
So it's like a assets under management type of thing.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of you're kind of ranked in KPIs as well. So one of them is assets under management. The other one is kind of how much new money you can bring into the bank on a regular basis. Yeah, so it's a lot of different KPIs. Pretty much a sales job. But as an assistant, you don't feel the stress. You are supporting someone with the KPIs while still learning kind of the ropes along the way.
Okay.
So is your hope to take over the guy's job? Is that it?
I think to many it is. For me, I haven't thought too much about that progression at the moment. I think personally, I might be more interested in doing something more technical in the next few years. So looking to see whether I'll be more interested somewhere like a product role or like a more of an investment specialist role. But keeping my options open, right? So one thing to know is like your first job is not always where you end up in the long run, right? So I think there's just like a kind of a first step into the workforce after graduation.
Thank you.
Speaking of jobs, right?
Yeah.
Would you say finding a job in the finance sector is difficult right now? Because word on the street is that it's getting a little saturated.
Well, Sean, I think your sources are pretty accurate. I would say the last 1-2 years is gotten pretty difficult to find finance jobs. I think it's a factor of the market. When I graduated, it wasn't as bad, but nowadays when I talk to my juniors, I hear that there's a lot less openings for roles that are in finance space, maybe tech and consulting, some of those bigger, more lucrative jobs, especially for SMU graduates. So for SMU, a lot of people like to go into like business. They like to go into these fields where I guess you get prestige or power or money or whatnot. So I guess, seeing your seniors do that, a lot of people just follow in their footsteps. And because of that, I think the market today is a little bit oversaturated. There are a lot less job openings. Many banks are not hiring as aggressively as they used to the last 2-3 years, which is very surprising to me, right? Because the economy is doing well. If you follow the stock market, everything is climbing, but so many companies are still not downsizing, but they're restricting headcount, and I do see that there's some pressure on my juniors. Yeah, so hopefully it gets better. Hopefully by the time maybe the three of you guys graduate in 4 years, the market is on an up cycle again. A lot more job openings. Yeah.
Hopefully so. Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to also ask about more in depth about like your job as a ARM, right? Yeah.
Right.
So you would consider a sales job, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how exactly do you guys, like, maybe without going too in depth to your strategies, right? How do you guys usually get clients, like find new money?
Right. For me, I have not brought in any clients, right? I'm still new to the bank, but from what I see, at least from the RMs, how they do it is really a lot of trust, right? I think something that we learn in school when we learn marketing in the JC poly level, it's all about guerrilla marketing, ways of not really conning your customer, but ways to offer discounts, ways to attract quick money. But I think in a lot of times in business, especially in this relationship management aspect, your idea is to build trust before you can even sell a product to anyone. And oftentimes what I see is that these RMs, these relationship managers, they'll be bringing prospects. Prospects will be clients that are not with the bank yet, but they're hopefully going to be new clients to the bank. They'll bring them for events. They'll consistently give them market news, market advice, provide resources that the bank produces, to showcase what the products the bank has, and also to show that these RMs are committed in helping them grow their wealth and show that that partnership exists so they can build a trust in the long run. So oftentimes when you're a client with the bank, they will usually bank for over generations. So you have people from second, third generation wealth. So they will have banked in the bank for maybe 40, 50 years. And the reason why they still keep that relationship intact is probably because of all these services that the bank offers, right? So one would be to kind of prospect or attract new clients one is to show the effort to not sell a product from the get-go, but rather to show that you're willing to work together with that person for their own purposes. To never kind of lie to your clients, right? You can't give over optimistic views. You should never guarantee something that uh, could not happen just to get sales, right? Always be truthful to your clients. And third, I think it's very important to maintain like after sales relationship. Just because the client has made a huge purchase from you, it's very important to continue building the rapport over time, because you never know when they might have an excess pot of gold that they might want to invest with you again. Yeah.
Very interesting, Edward, because who exactly is your is the general target client base? Because just last night I was with a bunch of friends and they're a bit older than me. They were telling me and they were sharing with the group about how a lot of their friends have become fin bros and stuff like that. And the word they use to describe these kind of people is slimy. So going back to your point about how you have to build trust before you can sell it to somebody. How exactly do you get past that stage where the client doesn't see you with an ulterior motive? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great question, Aidan. You know what? Actually, I'm also struggling to see that. I have no idea how you build that first step, honestly. I think on paper, the correct answer is to be very genuine with your relationships, and you probably have to show some side of vulnerability or some way to entice your client to build that trust in the first few months. It could take years. I can see some RMs prospecting the same client. From where I see in the history records, there have been years trying to build that relationship. It always takes time, but yeah, I think it's very, very difficult to work beyond that idea that your banker also has an ulterior motive, which is true, right? Because they are earning money from you when you bank at the bank, but it's kind of like a partnership, right? The bank wants your money, but as a private investor, you want the bank for certain reasons. So I think it's very important to sell that reasons as well, right? So I think going back to the start of your question, actually, like, who are the people that are being targeted? So for private banking, they are only looking for people of a certain net worth. So for UBS, the net worth requirement, from what I understand, is around 5 million liquid cash, right? So you're not talking about 5 million in properties or 5 million in assets. You're looking at people where they have like pocket money of 5 million, which is insane. I think these people are crazy rich, right? So they'll probably have a net worth of about 20 to 30 million, properties and whatnot, and then you have 5 million excess cash. They don't know what to do with the cash. So they're gonna put it in the bank, and hopefully the bank makes money for them, right? So I think beyond just putting it in like a savings account, private banks offer the chance for you to draw down a huge amount of loans, sometimes at a better rate than your normal banks. And then people use these excess loans to reinvest, like to invest more money, right? So you put $100 in the bank gives you $80. So now you have $180 to go and buy like a Nvidia stock. So that's one of the main reasons why people would use a private bank for excess loans. And the other reason is to kind of invest in very private ventures that the normal retail investor would not have access to. Right. For example, you have like a building that's being constructed opposite the road. You want to take a profit in that building. You want to be part of the investment committee for that building. Right. So a normal person, you only can buy like stuff on the stock market, right, for the layman, but you can't invest in the building next door. Whereas sometimes there are some opportunities in the private bank space. So clients would like to get access to those opportunities, and that's why you use a private bank. So I think that's one way of selling to the client, right? A partnership where both parties kind of benefit from the transaction. Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess bring us to like the main question that everybody probably wants to hear about. Could you give us like a range of your compensation, as well as perhaps once you get to the higher levels, also probably just a range of how high it can go?
Right. Yeah, so the first part about the compensation. So I think many of you guys looking at the graduate kind of paycheck, right? So when you first finish university, at least in Singapore, you're looking at a range of about maybe 5,000 all the way up to maybe 11, 12,000, depending on the bank that you work at, right? I would say if you're on a huge bank spectrum, maybe like your JP Morgan, your Goldman Sachs, you can see anywhere in the 5 digits for a private banking role. But obviously there are trade-offs as well. I heard recently that for some of these larger banks, you are doing a lot more than what you would do at a smaller setup or even in other functions. So the other question to ask is how many hours you're working, right? So if you're going to be earning 10,000, you're going to be working from maybe 9 a.m. to 12, 1 a.m., even in a private banking or wealth management setup, right? Whereas if you're getting paid 5,000, more often than not, you're ending work at 6 or even 5:30 at some of the banks. And some people would like that trade-off, right? I think 5,000 is really a very decent starting salary for a graduate, nothing to scoff at. And if it complements that with good work-life balance, then all the better, right? So that's the first part of the question. For the second part of the question, that's where, for example, the wealth management role gets a little bit more complicated, right? So we don't really have a typical progression like most other corporate functions. So for wealth management, you're going to be increasing in experience and seniority. Maybe you might get that pay bump of 5 to 10% every 3 to 5 years. But I mean, that's not what you're looking for, right? You're looking for the big money jumps. And for the assistant relationship manager ARM role, the next jump would be the RM role, the relationship manager. And that jump could be huge. You could probably earn maybe 15, 20,000 just from the jump. And that's just the beginning, right? So when you're in the sales function, you will start to get your revenue from when your clients are trading, when your clients have a certain AUM or net worth in the bank, and your bonus, your commission becomes a huge cut of your monthly revenue, your monthly paycheck. So I think it could be a huge range. I think you could even earn like 100, 200, 300,000 a month if if your clients are huge and you're really, gunning for that kind of best RM spot, best salesperson job in the bank. I'm sure you can earn a lot of money, but yeah, it's really dependent on I guess luck, the people because bringing in clients and how far you want to push yourself, right? I think it's a very common that people in the workforce, at least the Singaporean mindset is power, prestige, and money. And if you are going for one of these three as your focus, I guess you can go pretty far. But you have to ask yourself if there's anything beyond these three things in your life. Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of long hours, high pressure, you know. So I guess my question now is, if you weren't in this industry,
Yeah.
where else do you think you would be? What is your, yeah.
Okay. Well, if I didn't do accountancy and I didn't go in the finance path, I would love to have done something more, maybe on the media side. Like I've always floated the idea of trying to be like those influencer, right? Or like going on stage to do stand-up comedy, or even like just performances. Yeah, I've always wanted to do more of a kind of a artistic side of things, but it's very hard to go down that career path in Singapore. And from a family where a lot of my relatives are accountants, I think it's very hard to break out of the mold and tell your parents like, oh, I don't really want to do a degree lah. I just want to go out on stage and perform. It's very hard to go down that path as well. So yeah, if I had the financial flexibility, perhaps that's something that I would have strongly considered. Yeah.
Yeah, I also
thank
feel
you.
like the media or like the art scene in Singapore is a bit limited.
It's tough. Yeah, it's definitely not easy. I'm sure there are a lot of breakouts in the influencer scene, at least in the last few years, right? I'm sure your generation, your friends, you have friends that have become popular through social media. It's not easy, but there are success stories as well.
So, do you plan to stay in finance for the rest of your life, or is it as long as you can sustain, or do you have any further ambitions past wealth management?
Right. So I think for myself, the main reason I came into finance, actually moving away from accountancy, was to kind of develop kind of an understanding of the financial market so that I can invest in my own stocks, right? I think it's very important to build that understanding of how to grow your wealth passively. And I think what a lot of people forget is just a compounding effect. So starting young is very important. So I would like to take these few years to really understand and become a better investor. Ideally is to beat the market, right? Everyone says that they want to beat the market, right? It's not easy. I think it's very, very hard to do, especially if you don't have enough time. But that's the goal. And then once I am pretty good at what I'm doing, maybe I might quit the finance industry and find something else that I'm definitely more passionate about. Yeah, so for me, it's more of a practical sense that I'm still within finance. I don't have that burning passion that many of my friends have in the kind of the investment banking space. The more intense side of finance.
Actually, it's great. It's great that you mentioned about investments, because to my understanding, there are some jobs, like some investment side jobs, where you're not actually allowed to. Like, there's a lot of restrictions placed on you for investments, right? Is there such a thing in wealth management?
Yeah, so I think there's something that I didn't know, but I was pleasantly surprised when I came for my internship in wealth management, was that because we are helping our clients to manage wealth and we don't deal with the deals itself, we don't really have a red tape on what exactly we can invest. We have to declare our holdings. We have to get approval, so pre-trade approvals, but we're allowed to hold like single stocks, funds, bonds, and I think that's good enough for me. We can't trade because of our kind of a trading window period, so we can't buy and sell, but we can do the kind of the long-term holding, which is something that I mostly do for my own investments. So I think that's something that people don't really think too much about. So you're going to like investment banking, private equity, a lot of setups where you're dealing with insider knowledge of the companies, of any of the knowledge bases in your company. So if your company has done deals with some of these other big companies out there, you're not allowed to touch these investments. So I think that's actually a downside. If you would like to do investments, you might not want to actually be in some of these jobs. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm also curious.
Yeah.
Can I ask what age do you see yourself like retiring, like kicking it back?
Ideally, I always love to retire tomorrow, but I think the practical answer would be sometime around 40 to 50. I think it's something that's very interesting, at least for our generation, right? I'm not sure about your friends, but for most of us, everyone just talks about retiring as soon as possible. But it's also a practical understanding that if you retire too late, you can't travel, you can't do a lot of things that you would love to do. But the downside is because our lifespan is increasing, right, for our generation. If you retire too early, you're going to lead a very sedentary life for like 50 years. So I guess this is another thing to consider, right? So investing is one thing that you can develop that, even after you retire, you can still keep your mind active. So that's something to think about. Yeah.
I guess on a final note, maybe you could just give like a general piece of advice for our viewers watching, maybe just on how they should decide on what to work as in the future, be it in finance or other sectors.
Right. So, in terms of job wise, I think that it's very important to kind of run your own race. I feel like many people compare themselves with those around them. And I think it's very easy to do so with social media, and especially if you're in, let's say, a business degree, everyone around you is kind of vying for the same few jobs that are outstanding. But it's important to know that everyone's race, their starting point, their end points are different. You might not be the fastest, you might even be the slowest, but yeah, just run the race on your own. Don't compare with everyone around you, and just keep pushing yourself and find a goal to work towards. Right? Don't give up just because your first job might not be what you want. So your second job might still not be what you want, but just keep pushing yourself along the way. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. I think we've
Thanks.
run out of
Thanks
time.
so much,
Thank you.
Sean.